Now, as we do so many weeks here at the Daily Dose, we need to get to our Daily Dose top 5. You know, Super Bowl 57 last week was one of the most entertaining Super Bowls in history. Well, at least for like 57 minutes, right? And then the officials made a really impactful, questionable defensive holding call. And suddenly the game was taken out of the players' hands. Game over. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And after the game, yeah, there was talk about the Chiefs' celebration and the Chiefs and how great they were and all that. But there was also a lot of talk about that call. And a lot of talk about the NFL officiating in general. And you just know the NFL loves that everyone is talking about their game. But they probably don't love as much that everyone was talking about their officiating. And yet, it isn't the first time that a play, or 2 or 3 or 4, as you're going to see, have been questioned in the biggest NFL game of the year. Now, there have been other controversies, no doubt. And yet, if you stop and you think about the most controversial plays in NFL history, you might think about, the Immaculate Reception, or the Holy Roller, or maybe the Music City Miracle. But remember, none of those took place in the actual Super Bowl. Those were in much lesser games. And yet, when you stop and you do think about it, there have been some plays in Super Bowl history that did take the focus a little bit off of the game. And it placed it instead on the people in the stripes that are not supposed to be the story whatsoever. Today, our Daily Dose Top 5 is counting down the top 5 most controversial Super Bowl moments. And I'm not talking about, Janet Jackson or any of that. I'm talking about plays or officiating calls or something along those lines. When the officials got involved, probably a little too much. We start off our list at number 5, and we go back just 1 year ago when the surprising Cincinnati Bengals upset the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, and they made it to Super Bowl 56, where they would face the favored Los Angeles Rams. Now, if you remember back to this game, you might be saying, well, the refs really didn't throw many flags all day, and you're right, they didn't. They didn't throw many flags at all, and it was a very close, very tight game throughout. Unfortunately, we saw them miss some calls. They just didn't call them. Most of the first half, we saw some calls that, well, maybe they could call that, but they didn't. Hey, they're letting the players play. The referees, however, didn't suddenly flip that in the last few minutes of the game. Out of 6 total penalties in the entire game in Super Bowl 56, 3 of them were called in the final 2 minutes. Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins was clearly held. No call. And then we had another iffy defensive holding call on the Bengals, and that holding call would set up the Rams with first down and goal on the final drive of the game. The Rams would score. They would go on to win 23-20, leaving the Bengals, of course, without a Super Bowl win, and leaving Bengals fans furious at the fact that you haven't made this call all game. Why do you call it now? Now, I'm not sure if the refs changed the outcome of that game, but it was odd that they became so involved in those final moments. It was a little weird. Super Bowl 56 comes in today on our list at number 5. We arrive at number 4, and this is a Super Bowl that was a blowout. It really wasn't that close. There was no question that the best team won Super Bowl XII. The Dallas Cowboys used their doomsday defense to smother the Cinderella Denver Broncos. They completely dominated Denver 27-10. And yet, the next time the NFL Network is showing the highlights from this game, go back and watch the film. The refs did a terrible job. Broncos electric returner, Rick Upchurch, he broke a 67-yard kickoff return early in the game, and it actually set up the Broncos for a field goal. He was dangerous every time he touched the ball. So later in the game, when he had a punt return that it looked like he might break, called back because the ref said he had stepped out of bounds, but the replay showed his foot was probably 3 inches even from the line. Unfortunately, in those days, there was no replay. Then in the fourth quarter, up 20-10, Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach pitches the ball to fullback Robert Newhouse, who fires a 29-yard pass to receiver Golden Richards, and that put the game away at 27-10, except for one small item. Richards didn't catch the ball. He never caught the ball. But the ref ran in and threw his arms up, even though he couldn't see if Richards had the ball or not. And when you look, the ball's on the ground. Richards stands up and looks for it. But it didn't matter. The ref ruled it a touchdown. And you know why this game doesn't get more attention? For one, like I said, it was a blowout. Two, it was the first Super Bowl that was ever played indoors. And they didn't know how to film it that well. The game footage isn't very good. It's really dark. It's really poor quality. Super Bowl XII, no doubt, was won easily by the best team. But Super Bowl XII also had the referees with a horrible game. And it comes in today at number 4. We reach number 3, and we go back to Super Bowl 42, which followed the 2007 NFL season, where the wild card New York Giants were going to be served up to maybe the greatest team in NFL history, the loaded, talented, stocked New England Patriots. The Patriots had Tom Brady, they had Randy Moss, they had Bill Belichick, they had that monster defense. They were 18-0. They were expected to go 19-0 over a team in the Giants that had closed out their season losing 4 of their final 8 games. This is going to be a cakewalk. This is going to be easy. Except that it wasn't. The Giants' defense shut down that Patriot offense for most of the day. However, with just over a minute to play, the Patriots had a slim 14-10 lead, and Giants quarterback Eli Manning was facing a 3rd and 5. It might as well be 3rd and forever because you got to go score here. Manning takes a snap. He's under immediate pressure, and he's grabbed not once, but twice. But he escapes the rush. He rolls out. He throws a dart downfield to receiver David Tyree, who makes maybe the greatest catch in Super Bowl history on his helmet while being dragged to the ground by a defensive back. This Giants play is considered to be maybe the greatest play in Super Bowl history. The Giants went on to score the touchdown. They pulled off the improbable upset. And while many thought, this is one of the greatest plays ever, this is one of the greatest finishes ever, this is Super Bowl history, Patriot fans were screaming, referee Mike Carey should have called Eli down in the grasp because he was grabbed, he was held. I don't know that his momentum was ever stopped, but that non-call is still a source of bitterness for Patriot fans. And it comes in today at number 3. We land at number 2. And we know the most recent Super Bowl obviously had controversy. But like I said at the top, this isn't brand new. In fact, our number 2 entry goes way back to the very first Super Bowl in history. Yes, in the very first Super Bowl between the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs, clear back in 1967, we had a massive flub by the officiating crew. And this one was absolutely insane. NBC was so busy interviewing the legend Bob Hope that they forgot to go back to the second half kickoff. They completely missed Don Chandler's kickoff to open the third quarter. So what did they do? Well, CBS sideline reporter Pat Summerall was asked to walk over to Packers head coach Vince Lombardi and tell him what had happened. Having played for Lombardi, Summerall said, "I'm not doing that." And finally, the refs had to come out, stop the game, and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do another kickoff. We're just going to do a do-over. Imagine that happening today. So they kicked off again, and the game restarted. Why? Because the TV crew forgot to film it. Again, imagine that happening today. Imagine just getting a do-over. Oh, wait. The Chiefs just got a do-over in the AFC Championship game this year. Never mind. The do-over kickoff, though, comes in today at number 2. So we arrive at the number 1 most controversial referee calls in the Super Bowl. And I will preface number 1 by saying this. If I ever do this list in the future, I would probably move this year's Super Bowl ahead of this one at number 1. because the call in this year's game ended the game. It wasn't like, well, you had that call and then you could have bounced back later. No, it was over. It was over. On that call, the game ended. You could have just shot the gun and said, that's it. But we've already talked about that game and that call at length. So today on our Daily Dose, this is our number one entry. If it wasn't bad enough that the Seattle Seahawks had to take on a Pittsburgh Steelers team that finished third in scoring defense and fifth in scoring differential back in Super Bowl 40, they also had to take on some officials that I don't know why, but it kind of seemed like they had it out for them. This was not just one call. This was multiple calls. And the Pittsburgh Steelers would end up getting a 21-10 victory, but there were probably 3, maybe even 4 questionable calls, and they all went in favor of the Steelers. Super Bowl 40 was among the most controversial officiated games in Super Bowl history. An early offensive pass interference call against Seattle took 7 points off the board. We looked at it, and there wasn't really anything there. Later in the game, there was a phantom holding call that took another 7 points from Seattle off the board. And then, in addition, the officials allowed a 1-yard touchdown run by Ben Roethlisberger, and he wasn't even close to being in. And it certainly wasn't close to being conclusive on replay. Overall, like I said, there were probably 3, maybe 4 calls that handed the Steelers 14 points. Now, if you look at the stats, if you just take away the officiating, it looked like Seattle might have won this game. They had 20 first downs to Pittsburgh's 14. They had 396 yards to 339 for the Steelers. But the Steelers got those 3 or 4 favorable calls and won the game pretty easily, 21-10. That comes in today at number 1. Look, I don't buy into the whole games are fixed thing for a few reasons. One, and the most important in my book, Las Vegas issues betting odds. If it was fixed, like the WWE, they wouldn't, because Las Vegas is not in the business of losing money. 2, who all would know if these games were fixed? Like, who all would be in on it? Is it all the players, the coaches, the refs, just some, a few, not everybody? That, to me, would open itself up to somebody's going to tell. It's absolutely impossible to fix these games that way. And yet, you have to include human error coming into play in these games. It does allow, at times, for some very human mistakes to take place. And when they do have an impact on some of these big games. Hey, YouTube, make sure you go over and you check out the rest of the podcast, because this week on The Dose, we are covering a lot of ground. I mean, we are talking little Daytona, a little NBA All-Star Weekend. We even talk a little bit about Tiger Woods and the NBA. Are they headed for a lockout? But then we are taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from the NBA after the trade deadline. We take a look at which teams are probably going to be getting the number 1 seed in March Madness. And we also take a look at some of the biggest questions facing the NFL this year in their offseason. So there is a lot of stuff over there. Be sure you go over and you check out the rest of the podcast. I will leave a link here in the comments on YouTube for you. Hope you all are doing well. Have a great week. I will see you all next Wednesday.